The digital clock on the command console flipped to 22:30 so. In the cramped, windowless van parked across the Rue de Courcelles, the air was thick with stale coffee and palpable tension. 4 men, their faces illuminated by the green glow of surveillance monitors, sat motionless. Before them, a bank of equipment hummed softly, a stark contrast to the pounding hearts in the room. The team leader, codenamed Elijah, stared at the primary audio feed, his finger hovering over a single, unlabeled red button on a custom-built transmitter. The needle on the VU meter was dead still. For 3 days, it had been the same. Silence. The target was dormant. Elijah's earpiece crackled with the voice of "Lookout," stationed on a rooftop 3 blocks away. No movement. Street is quiet. All clear. Elijah didn't acknowledge. His focus was absolute, narrowed to a single point of data: the electronic integrity of a telephone line in a 4th-floor apartment. The line was live. The trap was set. All it needed was the prey to take the bait. A second voice, this one from Gadget, the team's technical officer, spoke with quiet precision. Signal path is clean. No interference on the carrier frequency. The package will receive the handshake protocol. The package was a standard French PTT model S63 telephone, indistinguishable from the millions in use across the country. Except this one contained 50 grams of military-grade RDX, shaped into a concave charge, positioned directly behind the earpiece. The trigger was not a timer, but a sound. A 2-tone frequency burst that would be completely inaudible to the human ear, but would activate a micro-detonator the moment the handset was lifted from its cradle. Lifting the receiver closed the circuit. The frequency provided the final command. Simple, elegant, lethal. Another minute crawled by. 22:31, ma'am. The team had been in this rolling steel coffin for 78 hours, rotating in shifts, living on protein bars and adrenaline. The target, Ghassan al-Hamri, known in intelligence circles as the Architect, had not made a single outgoing call. His paranoia was legendary, a trait that had kept him alive for a decade while his colleagues fell one by one. But Mossad intelligence from Beirut was firm. A high-priority call was expected tonight from the PLO leadership in Damascus. A new operation was being sanctioned, and the Architect's approval was mandatory. The waiting was the hardest part of the kill chain. It was a psychological war of attrition. Every passing second fed the doubt. Had the asset who swapped the phones been compromised? Was the target alerted? Was this entire multi-million-dollar operation, months in the planning, about to collapse into a catastrophic failure on a Parisian side street? Elijah's eyes flicked to a secondary screen, showing a thermal image of the apartment's facade. A faint heat signature moved in the room, designated as the study. The target was there. He was awake. 22:32, Saram. Suddenly, the VU meter on the audio feed jumped. A low electronic warble filled the van's speakers, the unmistakable sound of a telephone ringing. The 4 men froze. Elijah's breath caught in his chest. Gadget's hand instinctively went to his console, verifying the signal. It was an incoming call. This was it. The moment of truth. The ringing continued, once, twice, 3 times. The sound was a siren's call, pulling them all toward the precipice. Elijah's mind raced through the protocols. The mission parameters were clear. Detonation was only authorized upon positive voice identification. But the plan had changed. The risk of a family member answering was deemed acceptable by the Caesarea Directorate 2 weeks ago, after al-Hamri's last masterpiece of terror. 4 rings. 5. The silence between each ring stretched into an eternity. Then, a click. The line went live. The ringing stopped. The circuit was closed. Elijah didn't wait for a voice. The new orders were absolute. He locked eyes with Gadget, gave a single, sharp nod, and pressed the red button. The decision to place 50 grams of RDX in a telephone in Paris was not made lightly. It was the culmination of a bloody, 18-month shadow war waged across Europe and the Middle East. The operation, codenamed Wrath of God, had a single objective: the complete eradication of the leadership of the Black Palm, a radical splinter faction of the PLO that had declared war on Israeli civilians and diplomatic personnel worldwide. The man at the top of that kill list was Ghassan al-Hamri, the architect. To understand the operation, one must first understand the players assembled by Mossad's Special Operations Division, Caesarea. The team was handpicked, a collection of specialists at the peak of their deadly professions. The operational commander was Elijah, a 52-year-old Qatsa field officer who had led missions in Damascus, Tripoli, and Tehran. His defining achievement was the 1973 exfiltration of a high-level Syrian defector from under the nose of the Mukhabarat, an operation that required him to pose as a Swedish diplomat for 6 months. His skill was psychological endurance. He could outweight any target, his patience a weapon as potent as any firearm. The technical lead was Gadget, a 28-year-old prodigy from the IDF's elite Unit 8200. He wasn't a field agent but an engineer, a master of miniaturization and unconventional electronics. He had designed the listening devices that tracked a Hezbollah commander via the metal wire in his prayer beads and created the remote detonation system for a car bomb using a modified garage door opener in Cyprus. His expertise was turning ordinary objects into weapons. The primary field operative tasked with insertion was Dahlia, a 34-year-old combatant from the Qaidan, Mossad's assassination unit. Her file was a ghost. She moved through the world under a dozen aliases. Her landmark success was the seduction and compromise of an Iranian nuclear scientist, allowing Mossad to upload a virus into the Natanz facility's control systems. Her special skill was infiltration, the ability to become whoever she needed to be to get close to a target. Finally, there was the Paris station chief, the librarian, a man in his late 60s who had been in Paris for 2 decades, running a dusty antiquarian bookshop near the Seine. He was the logistical linchpin, the man who procured the untraceable vehicles, the sterile safe houses, and the political cover. His greatest feat was cultivating a source inside the French DGSE, providing a crucial early warning system for Israeli operations on French soil. He was the master of the unseen, the ghost in the machine that made everything possible. The chessboard on which these players moved was drenched in blood. The year was 1975. The détente of the early 70s had evaporated, replaced by a new, more vicious wave of international terrorism. In January, Black Palm operatives had detonated a bomb in the check-in line of El Al Airlines at Orly Airport, killing 8 and wounding 60. The French government, prioritizing its trade relationships with Arab nations, conducted a cursory investigation and arrested a few low-level sympathizers. The masterminds were never pursued. In April, a TWA flight from Tel Aviv to New York was hijacked over the Mediterranean. The hijackers, demanding the release of captured terrorists, executed an Israeli-American businessman and threw his body onto the tarmac in Athens. The operation was traced back to a planning cell run by al-Hamri. In July, The Israeli cultural attaché in Brussels was gunned down outside his home while walking his dog. The weapon used, a Czech-made VR-61 Scorpion, was a signature of al-Hamri's hit teams. Ghassan al-Hamri was a new breed of terrorist leader. He held no official title within the PLO, giving him plausible deniability. He operated not from the refugee camps of Lebanon, but from the heart of Europe. His base of operations was a heavily secured apartment on the Rue de Courcelles in Paris's 8th arrondissement, a location that provided him with a shield of Western law and diplomatic sensitivity. He was a ghost, directing his operations through a complex system of cutouts and dead drops. He rarely met anyone in person and never used a telephone for sensitive conversations, or so it was believed. He was, for all intents and purposes, untouchable. Attempts to reach him had failed catastrophically. A 1974 operation to insert a Kidon team into his building was aborted when French counterintelligence, tipped off by a sympathetic source, flooded the neighborhood. Mossad was forced into a humiliating retreat. Ghassan al-Hamri had become a symbol of terror's impunity. The genesis of the telephone operation, known internally as Operation Frequency, came from a single, horrific event. On September 5, 1975, a suitcase bomb exploded in a Jerusalem market. The device was packed with nails, ball bearings, and bolts to maximize human carnage. 22 civilians were killed, including 7 children on a school trip. Over 100 were maimed. The intelligence failure was total. Mossad had no prior warning. The attack was a brutal demonstration of Black Palm's reach and sophistication. Within hours, forensic analysis of the bomb fragments revealed the signature of a new type of barometric pressure trigger designed to detonate at a specific altitude, a hallmark of a bomb maker known to work exclusively for al-Hamri. This was the final straw. The meeting in the office of the director of Mossad was brief and grim. The message from the Prime Minister was relayed without emotion. The gloves are off. The political fallout is my problem. Your problem is Ghassan al-Hamri. I want him gone. I don't care how you do it. Just bring me a result. No more failures. The file on al-Hamri was reopened. Every piece of intelligence, every failed attempt, every scrap of data was re-examined. The problem remained the same. His Parisian fortress. He lived on the 4th floor of a 6-story Haussmannian building. The entrance had a 24-hour concierge who was on the PLO payroll. His personal security team consisted of 4 ex-Algerian Special Forces soldiers, loyal and professional. His apartment windows were fitted with reinforced glass. The French police maintained a discreet but constant presence on the street. Not to arrest him, but to monitor him, effectively acting as an additional layer of security. A direct assault was impossible without a major diplomatic incident and a bloody firefight. Poison was too difficult. He had his food specially prepared and delivered by a trusted relative. A car bomb was ruled out. He changed vehicles constantly and never followed a predictable route. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a mundane signals intelligence, SIGINT intercept. An analyst in Unit 8200, tasked with monitoring all communications in and out of the PLO embassy in Paris, noted a pattern. Every Tuesday evening, a call was placed from a public phone booth in Damascus to al-Hamri's landline in Paris. The calls were short, never lasting more than a minute. They contained no sensitive information, usually just pleasantries. But the timing was as regular as a clock. The team hypothesized this was a heartbeat call, a simple check-in to confirm al-Hamri was alive and well. The call itself was meaningless, but the fact that he consistently answered it was everything. He trusted his landline for these specific, scheduled calls. This was the crack in the fortress. The seed of Operation Frequency was planted. The mission was no longer about getting a weapon to him, but about turning an object he trusted into the weapon itself. The plan moved from theory to execution with chilling speed. Dahlia, the Kidon operative, was the first to deploy. She entered Paris not as a warrior, but as Catherine Dubois, a wealthy Canadian art consultant specializing in post-impressionism. Her cover was immaculate, supported by a shell corporation in Montreal, a portfolio of legitimate art transactions, and a flawless Parisian accent honed over a year of training. Her mission was not to get near Al-Hamri, but to get near his environment. She rented a chic apartment 2 streets away from the Rue de Courcelles, a space that would soon become the team's forward command post. She spent her days visiting galleries, her evenings hosting small soirees. She became a part of the neighborhood's fabric, a harmless, wealthy expatriate. While Dahlia established her cover, Gadget was in a sterile lab in Tel Aviv, performing surgery on a series of PTT Model S63 telephones. The challenge was immense. The explosive charge had to be small enough to be undetectable, yet powerful enough to be lethal. He settled on 50 grams of RDX, a stable and powerful plastic explosive. The real genius, however, was in the shaping of the charge. Using a copper cone liner, a principle known as the Misnay-Chardin effect, he could focus the blast into a hypervelocity jet of molten metal and gas. This jet would travel upwards, through the earpiece grill, and into the target's skull at over 8,000 meters per second. The victim would be dead before the sound of the explosion even registered. The trigger mechanism was equally sophisticated. It couldn't be activated by the electrical current of a normal phone call. Gadget designed a tiny integrated circuit that would only respond to a specific dual-tone multi-frequency DTMF signal, a sequence of 2 simultaneous audio tones at frequencies well outside the range of human hearing. The circuit was powered by the phone line itself, drawing minuscule amounts of current that were invisible to any standard line testing equipment. The final piece of the trigger was a pressure switch under the handset cradle. Only when the handset was lifted would the circuit close, arming the detonator. This prevented any possibility of the bomb being triggered while it sat on the hook. Within 3 weeks, Gadget had produced 5 identical weaponized telephones. They were perfect. The logistics of getting the rest of the team and equipment into Paris fell to the librarian. He used a network of Sayanim, volunteer Jewish diaspora who assist Mossad. A shipment of rare books arrived at his shop, its crates containing the surveillance gear. The command van, a standard Peugeot J7, was purchased for cash from a used car dealer in a distant suburb and driven to a private garage where Gadget's team spent 2 days rewiring it into a mobile SIGINT station. Elijah and his 3-man support team entered France separately on forged Belgian passports, rendezvousing at Dahlia's apartment. The operational phase began on a cold October night. The first step was total surveillance saturation of the target building. Using a high-powered directional antenna array concealed on the roof of a building procured by the librarian, Gadget's team began monitoring all electronic signals. A laser microphone was aimed at Al-Hamri's study window, capable of detecting the vibrations caused by conversations inside and translating them back into audio. The quality was poor, distorted by the thick curtains the target always kept drawn, but it could confirm presence. Another operative, posing as a city maintenance worker, placed a series of microscopic microphones in the public hallway outside Al-Hamri's apartment, concealed in the light fixtures. The team settled into the grueling rhythm of 24/7 surveillance. They mapped Al-Hamri's life in excruciating detail. The exact time his meals were delivered by his cousin, the 2-hour window every afternoon he spent napping, the nightly arrival of his security shift change. And every Tuesday, like clockwork, the call from Damascus came in at precisely 22:30. The initial plan for swapping the phone was simple, leveraging a human element. The librarian's network had identified the cleaning woman who serviced Al-Hamri's floor. She was a Portuguese immigrant with a family back home in dire need of money. The plan was to offer her a life-changing sum to simply carry a new phone in her cleaning cart and make the swap while she dusted the study. It was a low-risk, elegant solution. Dahlia, in her guise as Catherine Dubois, made the approach. She accidentally met the woman in a local cafe, struck up a conversation, and over the course of a week, built a rapport. The offer was made, $50,000 in cash. The cleaning woman was terrified, but she agreed. The swap was scheduled for the following Monday. The night before the attempt, the woman never showed up for her shift. She had vanished. Frantic checks by the librarian's assets revealed she had taken her family and fled Paris overnight. She had panicked. The plan had collapsed. The team was back at square one, but worse, they had potentially tipped their hand. The failure of the cleaning woman gambit sent a shockwave through the operation. Elijah convened an emergency meeting in the back of the librarian's bookshop. The atmosphere was thick with frustration. The simplest path was now closed. Worse, they had to assume the cleaning woman might talk. The operation was now on a clock. A new, far riskier plan was needed. The surveillance data was reanalyzed, this time looking for a different kind of weakness. The focus shifted from the apartment staff to Al-Hamri's personal circle. There was only one recurring visitor who was not part of his security detail. His younger cousin, Karim. Karim was a university student, ostensibly studying business. He visited his powerful cousin every Friday, bringing groceries and mail. He was the one link to the outside world that Al-Hamri seemed to trust implicitly. Karim became the new target. This was Dahlia's world. She put away the art consultant persona and began a deep dive into Karim's life. The team's surveillance assets were retasked. They followed him from his classes at the Sorbonne to the cafes he frequented in the Latin Quarter. They mapped his habits, his friends, his finances. They found the vulnerability within 48 hours. Karim had a gambling problem. He was deep in debt to a Corsican loan shark who operated out of a backroom bar in Pigalle. The debt was substantial, and the threats were escalating. The new plan was audacious and dangerous. It involved a false flag recruitment. Mossad would pose as a rival Arab intelligence service. The second major setback struck a week later. It was just after midnight when Gadget's equipment screamed a warning. The RF spectrum analyzer showed a sophisticated sweep pattern emanating from inside Al-Hamri's apartment. The frequency, the pulse modulation, it was unmistakable. East German Stasi equipment, the best in the world. Al-Hamri's security team was conducting a professional counter-surveillance sweep. "They're looking for us," Gadget said, his voice flat. On the audio feed from the hallway, they heard the telltale clicks and electronic whines. A moment later, one of the hallway microphones went dead. It had been discovered. Elijah's command was immediate and absolute. "Shut it down, all of it. Go dark, now." The laser microphone was powered off. The RF antenna was retracted. The van's engine started. Within 10 minutes, every piece of Mossad surveillance equipment in a 5-block radius of the Rue de Courcelles was deactivated and the team had evacuated the forward command post. The operation was compromised. They had been detected. A tense week passed in silence. The team relocated to a secondary safe house on the outskirts of the city. There was no communication, no surveillance. They were blind. The psychological pressure was immense. Had the Stasi-trained guards found enough to unravel the network? Was the DGSE now involved? On the 8th day, the librarian delivered a message. A single sheet of paper with one sentence on it, sourced from his asset inside the French government. No official inquiry opened. Internal matters only. It meant the French weren't onto them. Al-Hamri's team had found a bug, but they likely assumed it was from a rival Palestinian faction or even the French themselves. The paranoia had worked in Mossad's favor. But the target was now on high alert. The window of opportunity was closing. Elijah made the call. They would proceed with the Karim plan, but accelerate the timeline. There was no more room for subtlety. The operation to compromise Karim was executed with brutal efficiency. An Israeli team, flown in specifically for the task, kidnapped Karim as he was leaving a late-night card game. He was taken to a prepared location, a warehouse leased by another of the librarian's shell companies. He was hooded, disoriented. When the hood was removed, he was facing a man who introduced himself as a colonel from Libyan intelligence. The man spoke fluent Arabic. He laid out Karim's gambling debts in precise detail. He explained that his organization had a problem with his cousin, Ghassan. They believed he was skimming funds. They wanted proof. The offer was simple. The Libyans would pay off his entire debt to the Corsicans. In exchange, Karim had to do one small thing. He was shown a brand new PTT S63 telephone. "Your cousin's phone has been acting up. We know he's been complaining about it. This is a new one, a gift. You will take it to him this Friday. You will tell him it is a gesture of goodwill from friends in Tripoli. You will swap it with the one in his study." That is all. To sell the lie, they subjected Karim to a mock interrogation, roughing him up just enough to make it feel real. They showed him faked surveillance photos of his family in Beirut. The threat was implicit. Karim, caught between a loan shark and what he believed to be a ruthless intelligence service, broke. He agreed. He was now Mossad's unwilling asset. The day of the swap was Friday, November 14th. The tension in the command van, now parked in a new position with a different line of sight, was higher than ever before. This was the point of no return. Dahlia, dressed as a courier, delivered a package to Karim's small apartment that morning. Inside was the rigged telephone. Her instructions were delivered through a note, written in Arabic. Today, no excuses. The team watched as Karim left his apartment, carrying a grocery bag and a box containing the phone. He looked pale, his movements jerky. "He's terrified," Elijah murmured, watching the feed from a camera down the street. He might bolt, but he didn't. He walked the 6 blocks to the Rue de Courcelles, entered the building, and disappeared from their view. Now, all they had was audio from a newly placed, lower-quality bug in the hallway. They heard the buzz of the intercom, the click of the apartment door opening. They heard Karim's voice, muffled, greeting his cousin. Then, the door closed. The team was blind and deaf. All they could do was wait. The protocol was for Karim to spend about an hour with his cousin. Every second of that hour was an agony of uncertainty for the team in the van. Did he have the nerve to go through with it? Would Al-Hamri's paranoid eye notice the infinitesimal difference in the new phone's weight or the slight sheen of its plastic? Gadget monitored the phone line itself. A swap would cause a momentary disconnect, a tiny electronic blip. But there was nothing, just a steady, clean line. "He hasn't done it," Gadget said, his voice tight. "There's been no line interruption." 65 minutes after he entered, the apartment door opened. They heard Karim's footsteps in the hall, quick and uneven. He practically ran out of the building. The team watched on camera as he scurried down the street, not looking back, and disappeared into the metro. He had not given any prearranged signal. He had simply fled. "Did he do it?" Dahlia asked from the command post. "We don't know," Elijah responded, his face a mask of stone. "We assume he failed. We wait for the Tuesday call. If the target answers, we proceed. If he doesn't, we scrub the mission and extract." 3 days of excruciating silence followed. The team maintained their vigil, the failed attempt hanging over them. Then came Tuesday night. The clock ticked past 22 wags. The van was a tomb. At 22:30, the phone in the fourth-floor apartment began to ring. The sound filled the van. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3, each one a hammer blow against the team's nerves. Had Karim warned him? Was this a trap? 4 rings, 5. On the 6th ring, there was a click. The line went live. The ringing stopped. On the thermal imager, the heat signature in the study had moved right next to the phone just moments before. Gadget looked at Elijah. "The circuit is closed. The package is armed." Elijah didn't hesitate. The intelligence from Jerusalem had been updated that morning. There was no more room for doubt or collateral damage assessments. His orders were absolute. He gave the single, sharp nod. He pressed the red button. The command to send the tone was a single keystroke from Gadget. An encrypted signal flashed from the van to a relay on a nearby rooftop, then beamed down the phone line as a 2-tone audio burst. The entire transmission took less than 1/10 of a second. Inside the apartment, the sound was imperceptible. But to the microchip inside the telephone, it was a digital key turning a lock. The 50 grams of RDX detonated. The Misnay-Chardin effect worked perfectly. Instead of a conventional explosion that would have destroyed the room, the shaped charge focused the entire force of the blast into a single, cohesive jet of superheated plasmas and molten copper. It erupted from the earpiece, traveling at 27,000 feet per second. The result was instantaneous and catastrophic. Ghassan al-Hamri, the architect, was killed before the nerve signals from his ear could even reach his brain. In the van, the climax was a series of sterile, technical events. 22:33:18 p.m. Gadget presses the key. The transmission light blinks green for 0.1 seconds. 22:33:19 p.m. The audio feed from the phone line instantly cuts to a loud, violent burst of static, then dead silence. The line is severed. 22:33:20 p.m. The laser microphone, still aimed at the window, registers a massive, sharp spike in vibration, followed by the sound of shattering glass. 22:33:121 p.m. The long-range camera focused on the building shows the fourth-floor study window bulging outwards, then blowing out into the night, a brief flash of orange illuminating the frame. A shower of glass and curtain fragments rained down onto the empty street. Lookout's voice, suddenly sharp and urgent, cut through the earpiece. Flash and debris from the target window, visual confirmation of a detonation event. There was no celebration in the van, no cheers, just the quiet, focused execution of the next phase. "Evacuate," Elijah said, his voice calm. "Phase 3. go. The team began shutting down their equipment with practiced efficiency. Hard drives were wiped, consoles were powered down. Within 2 minutes, the van was just a van again. The engine turned over, and the Peugeot J7 pulled away from the curb, melting into the sparse Parisian traffic. Behind them, the first signs of alarm were beginning. Lights were coming on in the building. A faint wail of a distant siren began to cut through the night. The operation was over. The immediate fallout was a study in controlled chaos and official confusion. French emergency services arrived within minutes to a scene of baffling destruction. The apartment study was a wreck, but the damage was strangely localized. The desk was splintered, the chair demolished, and the victim was killed in a manner so gruesome that the first responders initially suspected a bizarre, ritualistic murder. There was no sign of a conventional bomb. The official cause of death was listed as a massive cranial trauma. The cause was a mystery. The PLO immediately decried it as an assassination by Israeli intelligence. The media ran with the story, but with no proof, it remained speculation. The French authorities, caught between their desire to avoid implicating a foreign power and their need to appear in control, offered a series of contradictory explanations. A gas leak, an exploding television set, even a rare form of ball lightning. The truth was buried under a mountain of disinformation, some of which was actively seeded by the librarians' network to further muddy the waters. The extraction of the Mossad team was flawless. Elijah and his support unit were on a train to Brussels by morning, using their Belgian passports. Gadget, accompanied by Dahlia, drove south, crossing into Spain and flying out of Madrid. The command van was abandoned in a long-term parking lot at Charles de Gaulle Airport, to be discovered weeks later and dismissed as a stolen vehicle. The librarian remained in his bookshop, a quiet, elderly man surrounded by dusty first editions. The asset, Karim, was exfiltrated a week later. He was given a new identity, a substantial payment, and resettled in Vancouver, where he disappeared into a new life, forever looking over his shoulder. The true legacy of Operation Frequency, however, would not be understood for another 6 months. The official justification for the mission had been punitive, retribution for the Jerusalem market bombing. It was a message to the world that no terrorist was beyond Mossad's reach. But there was a second, more critical objective, known only to Elijah and the Mossad Directorate. The Tuesday night heartbeat calls from Damascus were not just check-ins. Mossad analysts had long suspected they were a cover for something else. Buried within the audio of the calls, using advanced steganographic techniques, was a secondary data channel, transmitting encrypted information. Mossad could detect the channel, but could not break the encryption. The secondary goal of the mission was to recover materials from Al-Hamri's apartment that might hold the key. During the chaotic aftermath of the explosion, a separate Mossad team, posing as French forensic specialists, had gained access to the apartment. Their official task was to assist the investigation. Their real task took them less than 5 minutes. They located and removed a small notebook from a hidden compartment in Al-Hamri's desk. The notebook contained the decryption keys. When Unit 8200 finally unlocked the data hidden in the previous phone calls, the true stakes of the operation became terrifyingly clear. Ghassan al-Hamri had not been planning another conventional bombing. He was in the final stages of negotiating the purchase of 3 tactical nuclear suitcase devices from a disgruntled scientist at a collapsing Soviet nuclear facility in Kazakhstan. The plans intercepted showed a multi-pronged attack on 3 European port cities: Hamburg, Rotterdam, and Marseille. The assassination was not merely an act of revenge. It was a preemptive strike that had, without the world ever knowing, prevented a nuclear catastrophe on European soil. The death of the architect was not the end of a chapter. It was the silent, unwritten footnote that saved millions of lives. The 50 grams of RDX in a telephone did more than kill one man. It altered the course of history in a single, unheard frequency.